Welcome to Always Blue, the podcast where we explore the stories, challenges, and triumphs of Mount Royal University alumni. I'm your host, Tim Rahilly, President and Vice Chancellor of Mount Royal University.
And I'm MRU alum Scott Cruickshank. And today on the pod, we were joined by Ashley King. Welcome to Always Blue.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, hi, Ashley. Wonderful to meet you.
Yes, likewise.
And of course, you're a celebrated person. You've recently won an Outstanding Alumni Award from Mount Royal University. And not to be outdone, but you're also an Avenue Living Magazine winner and a Rosie Award for Best Podcast from the Alberta Media Production Industries Association.
This
Not
is true.
too shabby.
This is true. Yes, it's been a pretty fun award season and a lot of excuses to buy new dresses.
Oh, fantastic. It's always nice to have an excuse to buy new clothes.
How would you describe the last couple of years for you? Tim just mentioned all the awards and the honors. I'm sure that's not why you got into this probably. So what's it been like the last couple of years for you?
Well, this has been like a lovely surprise, but certainly all these awards that I've been recognized for as of lately wasn't something that I was anticipating or expecting in any way. The last couple of years, I was working on a play that I wrote, and we turned that play into a podcast, and it was like selfishly just like really fun to do. So like it didn't really feel like a lot of work. And now like, being recognized for all the things that came of it is just a really nice surprise and like a little bit of a cherry on top. But yeah, certainly nothing that I was expecting.
Yeah. Sometimes does the recognition feel like validation that you're striking a chord, that you're making an impact?
Yes, but it feels a lot more like imposter syndrome. Like, what am I doing here? A little bit, just like I said, a lot of the stuff that I've been doing, like selfishly, I was doing it because it brought me joy and happiness. And so the fact that like other people have also gotten that from the play or the podcast or, the work that I've done with accessibility is like totally exactly what I want and stuff. But I have just enjoyed doing it for myself. And as a result, like it's made a difference in other people's lives, and positive things have come out of it. So it's been really exciting.
Fantastic. I mean, I have had the pleasure of reading a little bit about your biography and your story, and I'm delighted that you're doing some work with MRU professor Meg Wilcox. But maybe it would be great for the folks who are tuning in to just maybe know a little bit about you.
Yes. Well, my name's Ashley. Hi.
Hi.
I'm an MRU alumni.
Fantastic. We
Go
love that.
Cougars.
Go Cougars.
But yeah, I am a visually impaired actor, writer, podcaster, performer here in the city. And I work for Inside Out Theater Company. I'm the artistic associate. And I work to make theater accessible for folks with disabilities or who are deaf that maybe want to attend theater and it hasn't typically been made accessible to them. So I partner with a bunch of different theater companies in the city to do that. Most recently, wrote my own play called Static, a Party Girl's Memoir that we performed here in Calgary in September of 2024, which we then adapted that play into a podcast and by the same name, Static, a Party Girl's Memoir, in which I worked with Professor Meg Wilcox from MRU to adapt that, and it's done shockingly well. It's done really well, and it's been listened to around the world. I think last time I checked, we had like over like 28,000 downloads or something like that. 28,000 downloads. I was like, does that sound right?
28 million, 28,000.
Yeah, just some big number. So yeah, it's done really well. And my hope in 2027 is to take my play on tour across Canada and hopefully, fingers crossed, internationally.
Fantastic. So yeah, you're a multi-hyphenate. You've got like broadcaster, playwright, performer. So
I feel like, when you work in the arts, you wear a lot of hats.
Fantastic.
For those that haven't heard kind of the nuts and bolts, can you maybe explain what happened in 2011?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess like the whole reason, I wrote a play and I wrote a podcast was to explain a story about how I lost my eyesight, because it was a pretty unusual and unexpected thing that happened to me. So in 2011, I was 18. I had just turned 19. and I was living abroad in Australia, and I decided to go backpacking through Bali. And on my last night in Bali, I was poisoned in a drink at a bar, and the drink was laced with methanol. So I had methanol poisoning, and as a result, it made me lose my eyesight. Methanol poisoning has a 80% mortality rate, so most people die from it when they're poisoned. I was fortunate enough that I was hospitalized in New Zealand, but unfortunately, they were unable to save my eyesight. So I've got about 2% of my eyesight now. And yeah, losing my eyesight at 19 was a very unusual thing to go through. And it was obviously incredibly difficult and incredibly hard. I had to figure out what my life was going to look like now that I was somebody with living with blindness. And so it took me a number of years to kind of get back on my feet. But eventually I did decide to go to MRU for journalism. What I really realized when I was originally poisoned, I was in the news quite a bit and had shared my story. And it kind of showed me the importance of sharing people's stories. And I saw how important journalists truly are in getting the word out there and getting really important stories out there. And the only way that I was going to save other people from being poisoned by methanol was by sharing my story. So yeah, I went to MRU, and since leaving MRU, pivoted into acting because growing up, acting was what I always thought I was going to do. But when I lost my eyesight, I figured, well, that's probably not going to happen. So I thought about a different career path. But I think you end up naturally going back down the same road that you're always meant to. So I found myself back in acting, but I've definitely still been able to use my journalism degree and what I've learned at MRU in my career since graduating.
Wow, what an amazing story, and quite a service to bring attention to methanol poisoning. But you have shown incredible resilience, and I'm sure you had some of that resilience before you were 18. When you look back at it, where does this resilience come from?
I get that question a lot, and when I think back to like what I was like, before this all happened, I was like, no, I wasn't that resilient. I wasn't that. There's nothing that like special about me. But when I talk to my mom about it, she says, like you were somebody who never took no for an answer. And I've found like living with a disability and even being an actor, you get a lot of no's. And I find that a no is just a different way to decide how to pivot. So with those no's that I've, maybe gotten in my life since losing my eyesight and prior, I've always, I think, just come up with a different way to go about doing something so that no turns into a yes.
That's an incredibly inspirational approach.
Sometimes when people write a play, it's for others to perform. Were you always going to be the central character in it? Was it for you?
Originally, I had started writing the play as a one-person show. So I was going to play all the characters, essentially. But as we did more workshops, I kind of realized how crucial the other character was to be played by somebody else. Because the premise of the show is it's about how I lost my eyesight, but it's the experience about what me and my mom went through with losing my eyesight, because it was both challenging and a lot for both of us. But I knew I also wanted it to be a comedy. And there's nothing that really funny about losing your eyesight, but I definitely tried to find a way to make it as funny as I could. And I think the thing that made it really great was being able to play off somebody else. And the person who actually played my mom in the show is a very, very handsome Venezuelan man. Dressed in drag. So it was very, very fun to be able to play opposite Jaime Cesar, who played my mom in the show.
What did your mom think of the show?
Well, I feel like she keeps things close to her chest. So I was a little bit mortified for her to see some aspects of the show, because it can be a little bit vulgar and a little bit of dark humor. So I was a little bit low key terrified for her to see the show and figure out what she thought, if she'd see the love letter that it is to her. To see our relationship, in these two characters that I created for the show. And she loved it. I don't think she really realized what it was that I had been working away on for as many years as I was. But when it all kind of came together and she saw, I think, other audiences like come to the show and be moved by the performance, like, crying, laughing. And I think seeing other people really invested in it, like, it was seen bigger. It was bigger than just me, and I think she was proud of that. I hope she was proud of that.
And then did she have any reaction to being played by a Venezuelan drag queen?
Well, the funny thing is my friends and family who have come and seen the show, they all were like in shock how well he got my mom down. So I think I saw so much of her in his performance, and I think she knew how fun it was to have him play her. But for the first 5 minutes of the show, you obviously see this man he comes out of this cupboard that he's hiding in at the start of the show, and he gets presented to the audience like the Virgin Mary, and like an angel coming down from above. And obviously you see it's a man in a dress, and so you're kind of like, why is this a man playing a woman? But as the show goes on, you completely forget about it, and you become invested, and you believe in the characters, and you believe like this relationship is actually going on between like Ashley and her mom. And that also has to do with how great of an actor Jaime is. But also it makes it a little bit easier to deal with the really hard parts of the show that are really, emotional and hard to get through, because there's a little bit of that humor that's still there in the show. So yeah, I didn't know that I was going to cast a man to play my mom. It was just, we did a reading for it and I needed someone who could speak Spanish. He was available. I was like, that's fine. And then once I saw him play my mom, I was like, that's it. Nobody else can do it.
Fate.
Yeah, it was fate. I'm like, that's your role. And I even tried doing a reading with a female actor, and just to see if maybe it would give it a different spin on the show, and just see maybe there'd be more of a motherliness that would come out. But I was like, no, it's got to be Jaime. So yeah, that was a choice that we made pretty early on, and it's lasted and will remain the same.
When people think of maybe a very successful play, they think, well, maybe small screen or big screen next. What was kind of the transition into a podcast?
Yeah, it is a little bit unusual. There's definitely not a lot of podcasts out there that are audio drama based podcasts. And Meg had approached me because this all actually started because Meg was doing her PhD and wanted to look to see how journalists could work with the community in a more better and ethical way, something along those lines. I don't know. I didn't write the PhD. But she reached out to Inside Out Theater to see if there was some project that we had coming up that maybe she could base her PhD thesis on. And having known that she was a teacher at MRU, and I never had her as a professor when I was at MRU, but we figured it might be a really good project for her to come on board with. And when she first got introduced to myself, and I knew we're going to be making this podcast, we actually didn't know what the podcast was going to be about. We didn't know if it was going to be a behind the scenes thing, if it was going to be the play itself, if we that kind of evolved eventually over time, and working together and trying to figure out what would be really beneficial to the play itself, what would be beneficial to me. But because I had written the play with the intention that if you were blind or low-sighted, it would be a very accessible play for you to attend. So in theater, we often say show, don't tell. You want to be able to see it in someone's acting, not necessarily in the dialogue or in the words. But for me, going to a play, that's not very accessible for me. So I wrote this play to have a lot of audio description built into the dialogue and into the scenes, so that if you were blind or partially sighted, you would understand what was going on stage. And podcasting is a blind medium, so it just translated really well, the script. There wasn't much changes that I had to make to the script in order for it to adapt well to podcast. And then with the podcast, we decided to do each episode would start with 20 minutes of the play, and then we'd interview somebody that was related to either the play or methanol poisoning itself, something that's been crucial to my story and to kind of where I've gotten to where I am today. And a lot of that was just me and Meg kind of jamming back and forth, being like, who would be fun to talk to, who would have a lot of impact to talk to, what do we want people to get out of this podcast? So we never really had a total idea of what it was going to look like until kind of like that first episode kind of came together. And so it kind of took me by shock that it did as well as it did, because I kind of thought maybe this would just be like Meg's PhD thesis and no one would ever really listen to it.
Like most PhD theses.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it's done well, and we've gotten such great feedback.
For someone like yourself, who is a storyteller, is a journalist, it seemed to have ticked all the boxes for you.
Yeah, it kind of did. Like, it allowed me to be able to use like my journalism skills because I had to interview people, but then it allowed me to use like my acting skills because I had to perform. And performing for podcasts is wildly different than performing on stage. And then it allowed me to also be creative in working with Meg to edit it together. Like, Meg would do all the editing, but then she'd come back and show me what she'd come together, and then I'd give her notes and feedback and be like, let's add a little bit more of this or that here. And yeah, it allowed me to really just be creative, to the point now, even more so than maybe writing another play being my next thing. I would love to do like a spinoff or like a second season, because it really made me fall in love with podcasting. And it's just so fun.
Wow. What, like, first of all, actually, maybe you should tell people, just let's repeat it, make sure that the people know what it's called and where they can find it.
So it's called Static, A Party Girl's Memoir, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple Music or Spotify. And if you just get a little Google, you'll find it also at Inside Out Theater's website.
And if you were, I'm putting you on the spot, but if you were to do a second season, what do you think some potential things to talk about might be?
You know what? I've been doing a lot of work this past year with methanol poisoning awareness and campaigning to try and get airports and schools to teach about methanol poisoning, and do warnings in airports and on airlines and whatnot. And so because of that, I've been meeting a lot more people around the world who've been affected by methanol poisoning. And so, that first season was kind of my story. But I'd like to tell other people's stories. I think podcasting is a really great medium for people to learn about something that they maybe wouldn't else have known about. And, if someone's not Googling this, they might not know that methanol poisoning exists. And so I do think there's lots of other stories that can be shared, and other people who either have, lost somebody or is a victim themselves to methanol poisoning, and maybe something a little bit more like investigative, explaining why methanol poisoning happens, talking to people who, are in these countries where it takes place, and explain a little bit about the corruption that has led to why methanol poisoning occurs. So that's just kind of been like percolating in my brain a little bit.
So some of the journalism instincts are coming out here, wanting to tell stories.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned accessibility in the arts, kind of with your script, including a lot more descriptions. What are other challenges maybe for accessibility in the arts? What else has caught your attention?
Representation is really is an ongoing challenge in the arts. If you think about somebody coming to a play that's not made accessible, how can you ever inspire somebody to be on a stage one day if they can't even get into a play to see it because it hasn't been made accessible? And so if we're not even starting with like the play itself being accessible as a patron, then how can you ever imagine someone's going to, dream about being on a stage one day or dream about being a performer? And if that's not happening, then obviously our representation is lacking, and the diversity that could be seen on our stages or on our TV screens. And so, as myself, who is an actor, and I audition for things, and I have an agent and stuff, like I get a lot of no's, and that was part of the reason why I wrote this play, because often in theater or in acting or as an artist, if you're not getting cast and you're not getting work, they often tell you to make your own work. A lot of the times I feel like that's the only way into being an artist when you have a disability, is that you have to create your own work, and that can be really taxing and a lot of work. So I would love to see just like more opportunity being given to performers with disabilities. on stages, on screens. There's still a lot of people, I think, who worry about working with somebody with access needs, thinking it's going to take up time or money or resources. But like access can be done in a really meaningful way that, yes, sometimes it's expensive, but sometimes it's not expensive, and it's just finding a creative solution to a really like basic problem. So yeah, I'd love to see more representation. And I look to stuff people like Bruce Horak, who is an amazing actor and performer and playwright, and he is visually impaired. And I think about when he was growing up, there was nobody like for him to look up to. That was somebody that was blind, that was, acting and being on stages. And I'm so fortunate enough that I've been able to look up to him, that I hope that I can also do the same thing for other actors that come after me and whatnot.
Wow. It's you've shared a little bit about what it's like when people kind of react and say, oh, you're brave, or, say these things to you. But I can't help but, as you're telling us this story, think how inspirational your story is. I mean, we all go through adversity. Usually, for most of us, thankfully, it's not as dramatic. But I think of maybe current MRU students who might hear this. And can you maybe say a little bit about what it was like when you were an MRU student and, doing things like contemplating going on exchange? Like, how was that? What was your MRU experience like, and who helped you? And tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was so excited to come to university because I thought with my eyesight, like I wasn't going to be able to go to university. Like, when I first lost my eyesight, the number one things that I went through, like that went through my brain when they told me that I was going to be blind, was like, I'll never go to university. I'll never have a career. I'll never drive. And I maybe will never drive. But to go back to your initial question, I was so excited to come to university that I wanted to seize every opportunity, even if those opportunities were maybe not designed for somebody with vision loss. But I was like, what would I have done if I hadn't lost my eyesight? I'm like, well, I would have gone on an exchange. And so, yeah, I guess I just would say to seize every opportunity and seize every connection that you can make. I'm still really good friends with some of my professors that taught me at MRU, and they're retired now and have moved on from teaching at MRU, but I'm still will have dinner with them and keep in contact with them, which is so great. And I think it says a lot about the relationships that you build at MRU, that they're not just for the moment, that they could be for a lifetime. And you'll be, there's still friends that I have from my program. And the experiences I did, I studied abroad in England, and then I also did a field school to India. And, I'm still friends with people that I met during those experiences. If it wasn't if we really want to go full circle, if it wasn't for journalism, I never would have worked at Avenue Magazine or interned at Avenue Magazine. And if I never worked at intern at Avenue, I never would have been asked to write a story about a theater company, which then eventually led me back into acting. And so I do feel like you'll be surprised about where you go upon graduation. Like maybe you don't end up in your field. Maybe you end up doing something completely different. Maybe you go back to school for something completely different. But the things that you'll gain from MRU during your time, I think are so invaluable. It's just so worth it to seize those opportunities and make those connections while you're here.
Wow. I have the task of one of my favorite parts of my job is convocation, right? And so, I face a couple thousand students and tell them what's next, right? That an MRU education has prepared them for the next challenges that come along. But what you're sharing with me is just so inspirational, that step by step, full circle moments, that the things on your bucket list do get checked off. And I think sometimes today's students really need that reassurance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if you would have told me that I would be literally sitting in this seat right now doing this podcast at the start of my year one that I was going to MRU, I wouldn't believe you. I'd be like, what am I ever going to achieve after graduation? That's going to be worth, someone wanting to talk to me about it. And, I think back how long I've been out of school now. I graduated in 2018, and I am shocked at like all the things that I've been able to do since leaving MRU, and all the things that, where my life's led to. And it wouldn't have happened had I not, maybe my life would have been gone down a completely different pathway if like I went to UC or, went to another university. So I'm like very fortunate for my time spent at MRU. And I think it's definitely led me to where I am today.
Well, I have every confidence that had you gone down another path, you would have milked it for every opportunity that it had. But we're certainly glad you came to MRU.
So am I. I'm really glad that I came, and I'm so fortunate that I'm able to, even upon graduation now, being out for a number of years, be an alumni and still have connection with the university. Like we recorded the podcast here at Mount Royal, and so I've been on campus so much during the last semester, which is something that I probably never would have really imagined when I graduated, that I'd still have these like great connections to the university years later after graduation.
Well, I think we've reached the part of our program where we dive into the speed round questions.
Oh.
Right. So brace yourself.
Okay.
And they're not too hard. Don't worry. So the first one is plays or podcasts?
Plays. No. Plays.
Okay. Acting or journalism?
Acting.
No question.
Yeah, acting. It's the Leo in me. I want to be on the stage.
And the last one is a hot dog a sandwich?
Not in Australia.
We can't check your answers.
Yeah, because they have snags on bread in Australia. And although they're on bread, so I changed my answer. Yes, a hot dog is a sandwich. I changed my answer. That was a hard question.
It's the hardest question we get, was it?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, fantastic. I already kind of shared with you my gratitude. But I think when we think about alumni, there's so many stories out there. And I think yours is just such an inspiration. Clearly, even before you're an alumnus, you were milking life for everything it had to give you. And even for an old, crusty, jaded man like me, that is very inspirational. So thanks for spending some time with us. And thanks for spreading the MRU word.
Of course. Well, it was my pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me and for listening to me just blab at you.